Joining us right now is Michael Rubin. He's the resident scholar at American Enterprise Institute, former Pentagon official, and also author of Dancing with the Devil, The Perils of Engaging Rogue Regimes. Well, Michael Rubin, did we just pay a ransom for these hostages?
Well, Brian, it's Arms for Hostages, the sequel. And what we really see is a situation where we have given, in this case, perhaps you could say $25 billion per American who was held as hostage. But what really troubles me is two things. Number one, we released 7 Iranian or Iranian-American prisoners who had been convicted of trying to bypass sanctions to benefit Iran's covert nuclear program, a program they now say they deny they had. President Obama not only allowed them out of prison, he actually pardoned several so their charges disappear, on top of which, just as with the Arms for Hostages situation, once the delivery was made, we have 3 more hostages, which were taken yesterday by pro-Iranian proxies in Baghdad.
What about Oman? What role did they play in all this?
Well, Oman has traditionally been, if you will, the intermediary in the Middle East from the very beginning of these secret Iran-U.S. talks that occurred when Secretary of State was Hillary Clinton. You've got a situation where Oman, which is this Persian Gulf emirate on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, has always tried to be neutral. It's always tried to talk to everyone. And so really it's become sort of like the Switzerland of the Middle East.
But we see reports that Oman paid $500,000 to Iran for each of the 3 freed American prisoners. How is that not a ransom that just happens to... Why would Oman do that? Why is Oman paying this money? Where did that money come from?
Well, ultimately, it's a way for the U.S. government to say we didn't pay Iran directly. But, it's a nod and a wink. And on top of that, as soon as we had the implementation day on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was, I believe, 2 days ago, then you have a situation in which the State Department has now openly announced that they've just wired $1.4 billion to Iran, which is, unimaginable. If anyone told you a year or two ago when we were debating this Iran deal that the State Department would be wiring this money, and $400 million of that was frozen Iranian assets, the rest was the State Department's calculation of interest.
But hold on a minute. Going back to Oman for a moment, that they sent money to Iran, and I'm looking at a story here. I've double-checked it 2 or 3 different places, that on January 11th of 2016, just a few days ago, the United States approved a weapons sale to Oman. It was $51 million. It had to do with TOW missiles. So we give the green light to weapons sales to Oman, and they, in a show of gratitude, buy the hostages out of there for us. I mean, it is almost like IranContra again.
It absolutely is, and what scares me is, with IranContra, of course, pro-Iranian proxies had seized 24 Americans. They had killed a few of them, and of course we have Robert Levinson, who wasn't brought home, who now there's reports has died in Iranian prison. This is that former FBI agent, who just marked his 8th anniversary since his capture inside Iran, since his arrest inside Iran. You have a situation where, as soon as Ronald Reagan had delivered that last load of weaponry, and again, in that case, it also came through a third party, the Iranians quickly seized 3 more hostages, and again, that seems to be what we've had in Iraq yesterday.
So when the President and the Secretary of State say that what we're seeing here is the birth of a new diplomacy and the fact that conversations work and this is a great way, what's your response to that? He's suggesting that this is the way forward now. We've made such great progress with Iran.
Well, again, I'll go back to the Arms for Hostages situation. We released the American hostages, and a lot of people forget that Arms for Hostages scheme under Reagan, it started as this idea, the same logic that underpins the Obama diplomacy, that we've got to reach out towards the moderates in Iran. What's important is what followed that. What followed that was a huge burst of Iranian terrorism. We had the blowing up of the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires, for example. We had all sorts of issues. We had Operation Praying Mantis, the mining of the Persian Gulf, and so forth.
Yeah.
So to say that this is the birth of a new diplomacy, it's really a birth of an age of ignorance where we forget our own history.
Well, and tell us now, let's circle back to the 3 Americans who were taken captive in Iraq. This is it's remarkable. Hours after Iran releases these 3 prisoners who were being held without the benefit of a fair trial. That's the other thing that people need to point out. The Iranian Americans who were held here as prisoners they faced a free and open trial. They really were convicted in a fair way of the crimes they committed, not these poor Americans who were just grabbed and held. Right after they were released, within hours, there were 3 more Americans being taken in Iraq. Now, do we know that these were pro-Iranian forces who did this?
Well, what we do know is that these appear to have been a pro-Iranian militia called Kataib Hezbollah, which is funded and trained by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They appear to have been wearing Iraqi army uniforms, and that's not to implicate the Iraqi government. Anyone can sort of buy those uniforms on the street. But what we saw is a very similar incident to this back, I believe it was in 2005, 2006, with the same group, where they successfully kidnapped 5 Americans, and in that case, they executed them.
This is very sordid stuff. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that raises eyebrows, and one wonders why there's not a call for a congressional investigation into this matter.
Well, I absolutely think there should be, and this isn't to criminalize a policy debate, but there's so much that we don't know about the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the so-called Iran deal, that you do have Congress in its role as an advisory body. I mean, actually, it should be more of a balancing body constitutionally, but there's no reason why they can't look back after the Obama administration is gone to look at what mistakes were made, if any, so under the guise of just improving our diplomacy the next time. But the biggest misunderstanding we have coming from the White House is just with regard to the nature of Iran. We don't understand that it's an ideological republic. Even if most Iranians are ordinary great guys, it's the guys with the guns that matter. When you're wiring money, when you're giving sanctions relief, it's as if John Kerry is wiring money directly into the Revolutionary Guard's bank account, because you have this economic wing of the Revolutionary Guard which is in charge of everything to do with oil, everything to do with construction, everything to do with electronics and manufacturing. It's almost as if, and I say this without moral equivalency, you have this body in Iran with whom we're now doing business, which is the equivalent of the Army Corps of Engineers, combined with Halliburton, KBR, Bechtel, Northrop Grumman, and just to throw a little bit more icing on the cake, you throw in ExxonMobil to the mix. That's the equivalent of what the Iranians have, and that's what everyone is now doing business with.
Michael Rubin, we got to leave it there. Thank you for joining us.
Good stuff.